The 3 fallacies of effective leadership. Before delving into the aims of effective leadership, the following fallacies of leadership should be put to rest. Fallacy 1. Effective leadership is straightforward. The first and most pervasive of all the leadership fallacies is that leadership is straightforward. This notion permeates any number of leadership books that offer a few isolated leadership traits that they insist can and should be increased to unending positive benefit. This is like a chef whose only advice is to add sugar. Sadly, blanket advice like this is not good for cooking or leadership. In everything, a balance must be struck, and there is no one singular additive that is guaranteed to make a better leader. Everything comes at a cost. A leader can not only be too cruel, they can also be too kind. A leader can not only be too insecure, they can also be too confident. They can not only be too overbearing, they can also be too relaxed. In everything, there must be equilibrium. Any agenda that defaults to increasing a singular trait or behavior without ever acknowledging the detracting results of adding too much misleads the reader. Consider again the chef. Were his only advice to add more sugar, then at least for some individuals, this would be the correct advice. Certainly, some recipes need more sugar, and this chef would not find difficulty cherry-picking examples where his advice was followed to positive effect. Obviously, there are thousands of examples where more sugar would be better. But does that make it the correct advice for everyone? The answer is no, and the same is true for leadership. There is no universal truth to leadership, no absolute for which there is not some exception to disprove. What is worse, though, is that often individuals focus their studies on leadership books they know to prescribe the very qualities they themselves already possess in overabundance. This is, in fact, an effort at self-gratification. Like the chef who already has sugar, obviously, if an individual's recipe already calls for a lot of sweetness, then they are in danger of spoiling the recipe by adding more. This self-serving effort to encourage one's own behaviors can ultimately prove to be extremely counterproductive. Fallacy 2. Effective leadership is one size fits all. Only slightly better than the first fallacy, the second fallacy of effective leadership does at least make acknowledgments that there can be too much or too little of a quality. However, it prescribes this within one singular model of leadership, which it insists can and should be applied everywhere. By this fallacy, authors would often ignore different circumstances, prescribing that their model of leadership is the most effective type for everyone in every situation. How twisted would it be if an army general told a business executive that she should lead in exactly the same way? What if it were reversed? In answering these questions, it is evident that 2 different models of leadership are required for 2 drastically different circumstances, and yet the truth is that everyone is in a different circumstance. Believing that one model of leadership is superior for a given situation is bad enough, but believing that this same model of leadership is superior for every situation is even worse. Imagine if doctors believed that. What if doctors had a one-size-fits-all mentality and prescribed pills before ever hearing a patient's symptoms? That would seem absurd, and yet, in many ways, that's exactly what is happening when a single leadership model is proposed for all situations. Certainly there is some reasonable expectation that by modeling a leadership style from someone in a similar field and circumstance, that it will prove somewhat effective, but it is deeply flawed to extrapolate that under all conditions and circumstances, a singular style should be applied without alteration. As an example, an individual could be a kind, gentle-hearted cruise director, but when his boat starts sinking, it is time to yell. Individuals do not want kindness when a boat is sinking. They want certainty and direction, and do not mind the tone when they hear commands being shouted. Effective leaders acknowledge different circumstances, and so their leadership is situational, applying different techniques to different individuals at different times. Fallacy 3. Effective leadership is fair and just. How sweet and wonderful the world would be if morality and leadership were synonyms. The third most common and confusing fallacy of effective leadership is that the ethics and kindness of an individual define whether he is an effective leader. Under this notion, bad people are implicitly bad leaders. Their ability to construct, influence, and maintain organizations is disregarded as irrelevant simply because they are not pleasant individuals. This is in no way a useful construct of effective leadership. Authors will often redefine the fundamental nature of leadership to support such claims that the lack of good nature and honesty in an individual excludes them from the list of effective leaders, but that is not the case. Bad leaders are still leaders, and some of the most horrible are still remembered to this day because they were extremely effective. The danger in this third fallacy is perhaps the greatest of them all, because it is the danger of denial. When individuals exclude these forms of leadership from legitimacy, they do not destroy them. They merely lose sight of how they affect influence. As a result, these leaders continue to flourish under the shadow of denial because individuals struggle to grasp the root of a power they deny even exists. In this way, those who are most ardently against these seemingly less conventional forms of leadership should work hardest of all to understand them, so that they can effectively explain and help others to resist their influence. I'm Thomas Campbell, and this has been a short excerpt from the 6 Fundamental Forms of Leadership. If you enjoyed it, please remember to click the like button. That goes a long way to help support and promote the channel. Also, if you've liked learning about leadership and want to stay updated as I continue to release advanced content, don't forget to click the subscribe button. Lastly, if you want to find the complete work, head over to kingscrownsandempires.com or search for the 6 Fundamental Forms of Leadership on Amazon to find both digital and hardback copies. Now I want to turn it over to you. Which fallacies have you been exposed to? Who's oversimplifying the problem? Share your thoughts and leave a comment letting me know.